Guys, we have made some serious progress now. We are in chapter 10, which is the tail end of financial accounting. This chapter has a lot of terminology in it. If you don't do anything else, make sure that you read through the terms in the back of the chapter. Good stuff to know and to understand. And you'll get those. A lot of those have been mentioned in chapters 1 through 9, so you're just kind of picking up on that. I will tell you though, great chapter to read and understand because it just kind of brings everything together for you in a governance sort of perspective. Um, there is an end, guys, to issuance of financial statements. And that end is typically for a public company for sure, and without doubt, a company that's borrowing money at all with a bank would have to have an audit done. So an audit ends with an independence auditor's report, and this particular chapter has one listed in there for, I believe it's Coca-Cola. So go and look at that independent auditor's report and just kind of read it and look it over and then pause me for just a minute and then read it over. Now, once you do that, then you're what you're looking at are the accompanying financial statements that have been audited. And you'll notice that they use different kind of terminology than you may have expected. Like, for example, they'll use the word consolidated. That means that all the statements of income together, of all the companies together. So they'll use the word consolidated. And then they actually use comprehensive income. So they talk about that section of the equity that is presented separately in some companies, right? Or with the balance sheet in tandem with the balance sheet. Okay. And the shareholders' equities and the cash flows. So we're looking at those different accompanying statements when we do an audit, right? And when we do that, then we then form an opinion. So we give an opinion. Now that opinion is going to state that if we think that there's very little immaterial error in this particular set of financial statements, then we will call it presented fairly in all material respects. So if anything's material, like if there's some kind of a error or problem with how things are recorded in a generally accepted manner, then we wouldn't use this wording, guys. This wording would not be. This is the wording of what is casually called a clean audit, but we in accounting don't really call it that because nothing's completely clean. But what we want to make sure that you understand is that an audit is not a guarantee that the financial statements are free of error. The financial statements are simply presented in what we believe to be reasonable, right, in its amount of errors that are in it, because we've tested the material to such a degree that we feel comfortable giving that opinion. So just a lot of test questions, guys, related to the independent auditor's report that come from chapter 10, and you very well could get some of those questions. So the terms in chapter 10 and the independent audit reports, important stuff. Know too, out of the question that comes from 10.6, that the audit report is not an indicator of future success. Or maybe future cash dividends, because remember, that's what the company decides to do or not do as far as giving their shareholders a part of their business, a part of their cash. But if we have any kind of substantial doubt about this entity's ability to continue to pay their debt, then we have to put a statement in that auditor's report that indicates that this we may have a clean opinion about this particular financial statement, but because of the ability of the company to be able to meet their obligations is not there, then we have to issue then an extra paragraph that includes an expression of whether or not the entity has the ability to continue. And if we have doubt of that, we need to say so, okay, as auditors. And we are required to say so with auditing standards that are promulgated out there and used by, and we better do, or the courts will get us, right? Okay, so I want to go to 10.7, and what this does is it asks you whether or not uh, you need to adjust earnings per share whenever you issue a stock split. And so what I want to show you here is that you would take the earnings per share calculation and you're going to restate it for the previous year when you have a 3-for-1 stock split in the present year. So you would restate your earnings per share for the year before, because remember, we issue financial statements comparatively. In other words, they're year by year next to each other. So if last year we had so many shares outstanding, remember chapter 9, we had so many shares outstanding, then all of a sudden this year we have 3 times as many shares outstanding, then we need to make an adjustment to earnings per share and reflect that in those comparisons. Okay, so you're basically restating last year's earnings per share by dividing it by 3 if you have a 3-for-1 stock split. And then, of course, in B, it kind of goes a little further. It says, well, look, what if in the third year you have a 2-for-1 stock split? So what do you do then? Well, then you have to take the adjusted earnings per share and just adjust it again. So that's what you're doing in 2020 is you're adjusting 2018, and then you're adjusting 2019, and then you have your regular earnings per share for 2020. And take note in C, if we have a stock dividend, then we have to have an adjusted earnings per share as well. We simply then divide by the increase, right, into the earnings per share to get a new adjusted earnings per share amount. So those items usually do not require a stock split, for sure does not require transactions. Stock dividend does require transactions, but it doesn't affect your total stockholders' equity. But these little presentations, whenever we issue to the public our financial statements, then these little issues come up as to, okay, wait a minute, we don't want to mislead investors, so we want to go ahead and adjust our earnings per share to give them perspective of what we have done with our stocks and with splits and dividends, and so forth. But anyway, just talking generally about those 3 things, guys. The chapter also has this litany of list of things that would happen that would be fraud if you did not record appropriately. And just looking over those misrepresentations will give you a sense of, okay, we've been learning for the last 9 chapters how to record transaction appropriately, but what happens if you don't? Well, if you don't, you can have financial statements that are fraudulent, or without doubt they're misleading. And so there are governance issues in effect that will try to minimize that confusion for investors that an MBA student needs to be aware of. But we are finished now with financial accounting, and we will be moving now into managerial accounting. In chapter 12, we'll be skipping 11.